So we're not doing Folkcast this year?
No, can't do Folkcast this year, sadly.
Why not?
Couldn't get it.
What do you mean you couldn't get it? I asked you to book it months in advance.
No, I was busy, man. I was trying to deal with. We had a lot of people coming to Bristol, kind of like higher profile comics, and I was trying to.
What do you mean?
That took up all my time.
What do you mean? They loved my stuff last year. It was full room.
Well, no, I asked them. I was like, hey guys, can Burt Williamson come back? And they're like, who?
I think I'm at the age where I have to quit comedy now, if I'm going to do it. So I'm 29, right, and I'm 30 in a couple of months. And I think if you do comedy in your 20s, that's like a bit of fun. Oh yeah, I did a bit of comedy. Whereas if you do comedy and then you quit in your 30s, I think you become someone that used to do comedy. And I don't want to be that. I don't want to be at my next job and people go, oh, have you heard about Burt? And they go, what? Burt from Accounts. What about him? He used to do comedy. Was he good? He used to do comedy. So if I'm going to quit, I've got to do it now. I like being 29. I'd sort of say I'm sort of like at the end of having potential. Which is a good place to be. I like it. You know, that sounds like I'm being cynical. I think that's a really positive thing. I think that's great, you know. Because it's also freedom from expectation. Like I now, for example, can't grow up and be an astronaut. But I can still be a chef. Like I can aim for the stars. As long as they're Michelin. You know, I think, you know, it's me saying that, just acknowledging that there are now some jobs that I can't do. For example, I now can't be a paper boy. It would be weird, right? I'd be a paper man. Which sounds like a rejected horror villain. The paper man is coming. Quick, lock the doors, light a flame. It's the only thing that holds him back. My friends think I'm being cynical, though, right? Like my older friends. I hang out with some people that are a bit older than me because, you know, it's good to give back. And they were like, oh, no, but, you know, you shouldn't be cynical like that as well. You know, it's never too late to turn it around. I didn't think I needed to turn it around. But I think it's an interesting age, right? Because all of my friends, every single one, they're all starting to think about kids, right? Even the ones that aren't having it, they're getting like practice kids, or as they like to call them, pets. I know they're practice kids, right? Because they always say the same thing. They always call them their babies. Oh, that cat's my baby. No, it's not. I know it's adopted. You're not fooling me just because you're both ginger. Always baby, isn't it? It's never anything else. It's never like, that dog's my uncle. That chicken's my wife. I tell you who's being annoying, though. It's not my friends that, you know, aren't having kids and, you know, getting pets, or the ones that are. It's my friends that aren't having kids, but they're making a big deal about how they're not doing that, and that's like a big choice that they've made. They're saying they're doing it for moral reasons. They're like, oh, no, I'm not having kids. No, I couldn't do that. Well, you know, what in this world? Oh, no, I couldn't bring a child into this world. What with climate change? What with all this uncertainty? No, I'm not having kids for moral reasons. And if you are saying that to your friends, you know, I do understand why people think like that, and I would agree. You definitely shouldn't have kids. Because they would be fucking annoying. Because they're raised by you. Can you imagine that parent raising that child? You know, that parent, you know, they're just there like going, oh, I'm sorry, son, for bringing you into this hellfire world. And there's just a 2-year-old boy in a high chair going, "Father, why do I suffer?" It's the worst, man. I'm not ready to have kids, though. You know, that's not where I'm at in my life. That's why I always wear a condom. In fact, I'm wearing one now. It's what we call a running start. I don't know why guys are so resistant to wearing condoms. That's always funny to me, that guys are like, "Oh no, I'm not going to do it." You know, because the stakes are so high. If you don't do it, kids might happen. And they're all like, "Oh no, it feels bad." It was wild, right? If all my mates were telling me that the best way to eat a roast dinner is with your hands, and they're all like high-fiving, "Oh mate, you've never eaten a roast dinner until you've eaten it with your hands." But there was a chance that in 20 years, that roast dinner might grow up and write poetry about me. I'm asking for extra forks, right? You understand? Where I'm at. I hooked up with someone, right? Wore a condom, and afterwards she goes, "Oh, I'm just going to nip out and get the morning after pill." I was like, "Oh, right, did the thing that means that you don't have to do that. Is that just something that you do every time?" And she went, "No." That feels a bit personal, doesn't it? Like specifically this one. This one's getting double bagged. So I asked her, you know, why me? Why me specifically? And she goes, "Oh, well, you know, you're a comedian, you're very self-involved, you don't have a stable income. I'm not sure you'd be a great dad." Which then put me in the weird position of arguing with someone that I did not want to have a child with, why I would be a great dad. I was like, I'm free in the day, we can split childcare. You should be gutted I'm wearing this. But no, I'm not ready to be a dad. The reason I know I'm not ready, right, is because I found out this amazing fact about newborn babies. Newborn babies, if they're submerged underwater, they know instinctively, from the moment they are born, to hold their breath. Isn't that an incredible inbuilt reflex that they have? They know that. But I know I'm not ready to be a dad because I would test that. And while I'm there, find out if it's a witch. That's a twofer. I think that should be the test, by the way, on whether you're ready to be a dad or not. You know, you're there in the hospital, in the what do they call it, the mum zone, and you know your partner's just given birth, and the midwife is like, "Right, we're going to take your partner out for a couple of scans. Here's this new life that you've created," and they hand it over to you. They go, "Did you know that this new life, they know instinctively to hold their breath underwater from the moment they are born? This life that you've created, isn't that special? Anyway, just going to nip out for 10 minutes. Don't mind that paddling pool." And then if you dip it, you don't get to be a dad. I think that's a fair test of character. Or if you dip it really well, you get to be a priest. Feels like a fair system. I went to my first baptism the other day, not my own. I'm just a fan of the sport. And the priests are so stingy with the water. Yeah. They're just sprinkling it on like it's Salt Baby. You know, I'm not a religious man myself, but I am there to see that baby get dunked to fuck. I don't know much about the Bible, but I presume it goes something along the lines of the wetter the better. You know, the devil's not interested in dry babies. I mean, I think that's... He goes, no, that one's too dry for me, sorry. I don't know why the priest is holding back. Like, what are you worried about? You're going to get too much holy water on the baby? It's going to get too holy? It's going to take your job? And it's stuck in, man. No, I'm not ready to be a dad. People say you have to have kids these days. So people are worried because, birth rates are low in this country. They're the lowest that they have been in quite some time, and people are concerned for various different reasons. One reason I'd heard recently was that people are worried that it's going to cause like an aging population, all these different things. But no one's talking about the hidden epidemic. Low birth rates means fewer MILFs. We are running out of MILFs. And no one is talking about it. Sure, they're in your area now. But for how long? There's no BBC News bulletin. We're running out of MILFs. In other news, GILFs are doing all right. We're going to have a scenario where in a couple of years we're going to have to start importing our MILFs as a country. We have to start importing them, and of course, what it's like here. Of course, there'd be a backlash. People go, no, I want British MILFs. That's what I want, homegrown, organic, British MILFs. And I'm not trying to be anti-patriotic. Of course, I love a lot of the great work that local MILFs are doing. Fantastic world-leading MILFery. But you have to accept that we can't subsidise regional MILFs indefinitely. You must accept the reality that we live in a global MILF market, where the free movement of MILFs benefits not only the MILFs themselves, but the consumers of the MILFs' work. You compare it what it was like, pre-industrial revolution. If you were a MILF fan, all you had access to, at best, was your mate's mum. But you have to accept the reality. We can't subsidise regional MILFs indefinitely. People are concerned. They're saying we've got to boost GDP, gross domestic punani. But anyway, enough on politics. I'd say where I'm at in terms of my journey about having kids is that it's no longer absolutely no. It's more like I'm not ready, which I think it doesn't seem like a big distinction, but I think that's a pretty huge change really, and I can prove it to you with an example. If you were to ask me, Burt, are you a terrorist? And I said no. That's great. If you were to ask me, Burt, are you a terrorist? And I said, I'm not ready. It's terrifying, right? I don't think I have what it takes to be a terrorist, though. I don't think I've got what it takes. The only thing I've got going for me in that regard is that I hate public transport. Which I think would be quite confusing, right? Because, something would happen and people go, what does it mean? And I go, no, I just really hated that bus. That's the whole thing. I think the reason it was no for a long time is I had quite an intense experience when I was a kid. I had a near-death experience. I had a severe allergic reaction to a Brazil nut, right? Spoilers, I lived, but... I got rushed to hospital, all these different things happened, and it meant that I had to then, carry an EpiPen, all these different things, because it was such a serious allergy. You might be hearing my accent, right, and thinking, really, Bert, you're allergic to the poshest nut? Yeah, it turns out you can overdose on being middle class. But, you don't need to feel sorry for me. I found after I had that diagnosis, Brazil nuts very easy to avoid. I wasn't leading a particularly Brazil nut-based life. I didn't come back from school and go, oh, Mum, what's for dinner? And she'd go, well, it was going to be Brazil nuts. But it isn't because of your disability. It's cashews again. You know, nothing about my life changed, and you know that was fine. Apart from the fact that the school I went to was obsessed with this allergy. Schools are obsessed with allergies. Wherever I went, whatever we were doing, the school was always like, "Oh, Bert, have you got your EpiPen? Have you got your EpiPen?" I'd be like, "No, we're going swimming." There's not going to be a nut in the pool, and even if there is, I reckon I'm quicker. On land it's close, but in the water I got 'em. And also, as my swim teacher, if you've not taught me to swim faster than a nut, I feel that's more on you than it is on me. I say, get a packet of them, chuck them in the pool, create a little obstacle course, you will get the best session out of me yet. But you know, because of this allergy that I had at this school, I got lumped in with all the other nut dweebs. And when I say nut dweeb, you know exactly who I mean. It's anyone in this room who's thinking, actually, Bert, a Brazil nut is technically a seed. It's you. You're a nut dweeb. But I got lumped in with these kids, even though I could eat a Snickers. And I often did in front of them. I was kind of like their god in a way. We'd be sitting round there and I'd be eating it and they go, "Oh, Bert, what does it taste like?" I'd be like, "Oh, it's amazing. That's the best chocolate bar. I love it. Anyway, enjoy your nutless gruel, boy." But because of that, I had to spend every lunch break at what was known as the no nut table, which in hindsight, not a name that I liked. But what changed my attitude to kids is I started working with kids. You know, that was one of my jobs during the pandemic. I worked as a TA, and I really, really enjoyed it. And that was, that was a big surprise to me. And that's what changed me from going like no to not ready, because of how fun I found it, even though I thought that I wouldn't. It's weird going back to school as a guy in your late 20s, because it's recent enough that there are things you recognise, but far enough away that so much has changed, right? So I recognise, all these kids at the after-school club I worked with, they're all watching the same films I watched growing up. Like they'd be, asking, "Oh, can we watch Ants again? Can we watch Bugs Life?" Two films that came out in 1998 when I was 3, within 6 months of one another. 2 ant-based films within 6 months. That is a market saturation we have never recovered from. Ants, spelt with a Z to demonstrate that those ants do not give a fuck. And Bugs Life, they both cast big Hollywood actors to try and get people in during the time, to try and get people to watch the shows. Ants with a Z, they cast Woody Allen, and Bugs Life cast Kevin Spacey. Definitely don't want those ants in your pants, do you? Some very creepy crawlies indeed. But what was different, right, is these kids, they had all social media, they had all these different elements, like TikTok was a huge thing. And particularly with the young boys I worked with, a lot of them, they would be obsessed with Andrew Tate, and they'd always be talking about him and all these other male influencers and stuff. And I think the reason I heard so much from these young boys was because I was in a sweet spot for them, right? I wasn't a teacher, so I didn't have direct authority over them, and I wasn't related to them, so there wouldn't be any long-term consequences where I go, "Oh, so-and-so said this," right? So they would try out their versions of masculinity on me that they'd hear online and parrot on me, right? That's what they would say to me. So they come up to me and they go, "Oh, sir, am I an alpha?" And I'm like, "No, not if you have to ask." You failed at the first hurdle. Like, oh, sir, have you got a side hustle? Have you got a side hustle? I'm like, yeah, you're looking at it. Obviously, hanging out with you isn't my main hustle. That would be weird. Alpha was the big one though. These kids, they loved the idea of like alphas and betas because it's all over like these. When I say manosphere podcasts, that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean, right? And all these like male influencers, these gym bros, crypto bros, all those flavour of online influencers. They all seem to be obsessed with the idea of alphas and betas, and that was very attractive to these kids. They'd always go, "Oh, you're an alpha, sir, or you're a beta, or all this, right?" And I don't know why these guys on these podcasts are obsessed with it, right? Because they will present themselves as very important, very rational, free thinkers. They go, I'm an alpha, all this, and then they will then do their favourite thing simultaneously and shit on women for being spiritual. They'll be like, oh, isn't it dumb that women like horoscopes? Anyway, let me tell you what kind of wolf I am. At the end of the day, both of your behaviours are being controlled by the moon. There is no difference. You can't be like, magic's bullshit, but let me sell you this dust that makes you bigger. It's so silly, man. I think these podcasts, they're more pernicious than that as well, because they're trying to sell a lifestyle, and that's why these boys buy into it, because they see these successful guys going, oh yeah, life's all about like models, fast cars, all this sort of stuff. And it's nonsense, right? Anyone that talks about fast cars as much as these guys on these podcasts do comes in under a minute. Why are you in such a hurry? If you want to take one thing away from this show, fuck someone that owns a barge. They've chosen the slowest mode of transport. It is 5 hours to anywhere. There will be time for foreplay. You're getting wet no matter what, and that is why they call them tugboats. But I think I think it is sinister, right? Because it bled into these kids. One of the kids in year 6, right? He said to me something that I knew he'd heard on a podcast because it was too well formed. He said to me, "Sir, how come is it everyone who fought and died in all the wars, they only get a minute's silence, but pride is a whole month?" Right? I think that's quite a weird thing to say, right? You know, and I'd forgive you for thinking that if you were either a little boy or an idiot. But it's not comparable in the slightest, is it? The minute silence is something this kid has done throughout his life. It's a part of our culture. It's a paying of respects, an important thing, but very, very different to pride, which is an optional celebration for a group of people that have had it far too hard for far too long, right? You know, it's not part of our lives in the same way, right? At no point when I was at primary school did the teacher come out and say, all right, now, simmer down, class. You have a minute now while you all think about gay stuff. Even the Queen's doing it. No one's getting conscripted into pride, are they? No one's like, where did you serve? Brighton, actually. Oh my God, war zone down there. I'm a straight guy myself, so I don't like sucking dick. But they train you up. And I thought the pension's good. For Queen and Queen. Slay. Yes, Commander. My main role at the after-school club, right, was really a lot of food prep, because they'd have a full day at school, they'd be hungry when they got off, and then, you know, they'd need a little bit to tie them over until their parents could be bothered to pick them up. That was sort of what my role was. And for whatever reason, these kids at this school that I worked at were obsessed with grapes. They loved grapes. My God, they loved them, right? You know, and so I would spend 30 minutes every day cutting grapes. That's what I would do. The reason I had to do that was because before I'd started working there, a child had come in and had what could only be described as more grape than they could handle. They'd started choking, they'd gone to A&E, they were fine. But it meant, the school have their protocols. They came back, there was a big meeting over Grape Gate. And what are we going to do about the whole grape situation? To which no one put their hands up and said, maybe we should just stop feeding these kids grapes. They were like, no. Obviously these kids need to be getting graped up no matter what. Instead, let's hire a man specifically to cut grapes for 30 minutes every day. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is? Cutting a grape. It is already an edible size. I just think if you're a child and you can't handle eating a whole grape, do you deserve to live? That's got to be the minimum threshold of education we're setting these kids up with. The ability to eat a grape. Otherwise they're going to go out there into the wild, thinking they're hot shit, schmoozing their boss at their first big corporate networking event. Thinking they're incredible, saying, hire me, promote me. Then a waiter comes over with a plate of wine. Oh, yes, please. Sipping on that. What's that? A bit of cheese. And what's that accompanying the cheese? Grapes. And they'll be thinking, fuck. Is there not anyone here to cut the grapes? I'm not a monster, though. Starting on something small in reception, like a raisin. Year 6, whole grapes, gifted and talented, really big grapes. But I like working there, man. It surprised me. It surprised me that I enjoyed it, but what really surprised me is that the kids liked me. I thought they would just think I was just some boring old guy that didn't have anything interesting to say, but they were really, really nice. I felt very welcome. And there are days where I miss that job, and that's crazy to me. I miss it. I really do. I remember one day when I was in the playground, and a girl came up to me. She said, I think one day when I grow up, I might like to marry you. Which is sweet, right? But I had to explain to her that she really wasn't my type. I was like, firstly, you're chat shit. Barbie again, boring. Your homework's always late. Get it together. And you are 7 years old. Mainly that last one, to be honest. That's my ick. That's a big red flag for me. Apparently I was too harsh at the headmistress, she took me to one side and she said, what are you doing? And I said, all I'm doing is saying that I don't fancy a 7-year-old girl. Which I would argue is why you've hired me. She was like, no, but you need to be more compassionate to the children. I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? I can't exactly let her down gently. I can't be like, oh, no, maybe one day if you grow up to be hot. Doesn't feel appropriate, does it? I'm reminded of those days, right? Quite often, because I give blood a lot. And every time I've given blood, mostly, 16 out of the 19 times I have given blood, my blood has gone to children around the same age that I used to work with. And the reason I know that, by the way, is I get a text from the NHS. I'm not following the van. I trust the process. I'm not like, are they drinking it? I believe them. But why is it kids? Why is it kids that often? Like, is the NHS looking at my chart going, it appears Burt has kids' blood for some reason. I've never seen that before. Well, we better give that to a child then. No, I got man blood, that's what I got. Don't laugh at me if you don't believe me. I have man blood, Whatever is in my blood has made me a big guy, right? I'm 6'3", I'm 100 kilograms, I've even been clinically diagnosed by a doctor as an absolute unit. And I've been big my whole life. When I was born, I was a 10-pound baby. That's 40 burgers worth of baby. On the ward, they called me HMS Undunkable. Good luck baptizing me. You're gonna need a bigger bath. You know, I've also, hormonally quite different to some of the little girls that I used to work with. You know, I've got an adult man's level of testosterone. Definitely above average there, actually. And they're now giving that to girls around the same age that I used to work with. That's weird, right? I'm imagining Lily, age 5, bursting into school the next day, absolutely ripped, because she's hooked up to the good stuff. She's going to be angry, she's going to be competitive, she's going to really want to win the egg and spoon race. And she will, because she's doping. Get a packet of crisps when you give blood. That feels like a fair trade, doesn't it? For a pint of my life's essence. Some cheese and onion, ridged for my pleasure. Changed the way I see myself. Now I don't see myself as a human being, I just see myself as a multi-pack. But the reason they give you crisps, right, is because, when you give blood, you crave a lot of salt, a lot of minerals, because, you've lost that pint of blood. And it's a good way, crisps specifically, to get you back up to where you need to be. But I give blood a lot. I know salt can be dangerous. I didn't want to overdo it. So I Googled, what is a lethal dose of salt for a human being? And the first result that came back was the number for Samaritans. Chill out, Samaritans. No one is doing it like that. We've got to make sure the salt guys don't slip through the net. Take a day off. I want to live like a man, not die like a slug. But I'm worried now, because I've Googled that. I'm worried my name's flagged up, because I've Googled that and that prevention watch list has come up. I'm worried now that I'm on some government database as like a high-risk individual for that sort of stuff. And then now, next winter, I won't be able to get the salt that I need. The council will be like, oh no, don't de-ice Burt's Drive. A very troubled man lives there. He'll be licking the pavements, waiting for sweet release. No, I lick the pavements for fun. That's why I do it. I like giving blood, though. It's something that I'm proud of that I do. I think, giving blood, I think, is the closest I can get in terms of vibe, right, to what it's like to breastfeed. In terms of, energy, right, using my body to sustain another life. Right, like now when I see a woman breastfeeding in public, I'm just like, yeah, I get it. I'm with you, sister. You'd think from what I'm saying, right, that I'd prefer it if my blood went to guys. And that's what the other 3 times it's gone to. 16 out of the 19 times kids. The other 3 times it's gone to guys quite a bit older than me. And you think that you prefer that? No, that's worst case scenario. And I'll explain it to you, right? Every now and again, as is my right, I will get an erection. And that's fine. I don't have one now. You can relax. But I've had my blood in there, and then it's gone back in. It's circled round, mixed in, then I then have gone and given blood. Right? And I know where it's been. And so do they. But then they've taken that out of me, haven't they? And they've now put that in another man who can now have my blood in his dick. In like some kind of donor boner. I just think as well, right, like, if you had sex with someone with like my blood in his dick, like for me, does that count? Like, have I wingmanned him? Is that an assist? How do I put that one in the spreadsheet? I was in the waiting room, right, waiting to give blood, and I was just scrolling through my phone, and then one of these, like, podcast bros that I talked about a bit earlier, right, he popped up, And he was this huge, muscly monster of a man, and he was shitting on people for being, neurodivergent. He was saying, "Oh, it's all silly, it's all made up. That's all come over here. That's all just happening now, isn't it? It wasn't like that back in my day." And specifically, he was making fun of people that, in his view, were claiming to have autism. And that really upset me, because autism runs in my family. A lot of people that I love have autism, and to hear this guy talk about that like that really, really didn't like it. And I was watching this guy on this rant, and I was thinking, well, let's look at you for a moment. You are this huge, muscly monster of a man, so much so that you've clearly worked out to the point of obsession, so much so that you could call it a special interest. You are in a format where it is encouraged that you speak and monologue without a back and forth about your preferred subject, which happens to be how you love a routine and are a fussy eater. You obviously have autism. And that's great. You don't need to be like that, man. It really upset me because my dad had autism. I say had. He passed. I don't know whether he still has autism. Like whether it continues on into the afterlife. Whether it's attached to the soul. Or whether it sort of just gradually builds up in the ground. And then the ground gets more autistic. Until it's turned into cement, the most orderly of all the ground. But I didn't know that my dad had autism until after he passed, right? Because whenever he did something unusual, my mum and my sister, they would joke and they'd go, "Oh, that's Dad's autism," right? And then after he passed, my sister made the same joke, going, "Oh yeah, well Dad did that, I think that was his autism." And I said, "Oh, that's so lovely that you're keeping that joke going. That makes me feel like he's still here. Thanks for that, don't stop doing that." And she went, "No, Bert, that's not a joke. He had autism." And let's not look too deeply into the fact that I missed that social cue. But I think in my defence, being a dad and having autism is very similar. He would talk to me for hours on end about solar panels. No, my dad passed, that was tough. He had a terminal disease, which feels weird to say that, the way that it worked out is that because we knew he was unwell, we got to spend a lot of time with him, right, and have some lovely days out, create some lovely memories. But because of the nature of the disease, it meant my dad's last few years, he was very heavily disabled, but we were doing all these lovely activities, and my mum suggested an escape room, which I think is a bit on the nose for a man in a wheelchair. But to be fair, we took the ramps out, left him to it. It was a very cheap day out. I think escape rooms are bullshit, by the way. I can beat any escape room on the planet in under a minute, and I'm not on a single leaderboard. It's absolute nonsense, right? If you want to beat them in under a minute, I'll share with you how you do it. What you do is you go in, you bring a Brazil nut with you. Bring a Brazil nut with you. You pop it, you start having a reaction, they're in there like a flash. You're like, got it, put it on the leaderboard. And then they never do. Got to do all sorts of lovely things with my dad. We went to Bristol Aquarium a lot. I love Bristol Aquarium, man, it's really nice. On the way in, though, I think they have this on the way in. It's a sign that says annual membership. I think that is quite arrogant for an aquarium. They're basically just going, "Oh, once you see these fish, you'll be back." So obviously I bought it. If I go enough, it's 20p a look. And because of that, I'm now part of an elite group in Bristol where I can now go look at fish whenever I want. Do you understand how liberating that is for a man? To know that I always have that in the back pocket. Like I could be talking to my friend and he's just being annoying and boring. I'm just thinking, right, I'm out. It's pufferfish time. People are like, "Oh, I'm struggling to fit in at work." I'm like, "Did you know a 200-pound octopus can fit through the hole the size of a coin?" So don't you tell me about fitting in. great. I go in the day a lot because I'm free in the day. And when you go in the morning to the aquarium, there's only really two groups in there, right? And that is predominantly, other than me, school trips and special needs days out. And I catch the staff looking at me, trying to guess which group I'm in. But I like it. I love going to the aquarium. I'm definitely going to renew my membership, which is nice, right? Because that means now I have to set aside a little bit each year of money and go, all right, okay, that's fish money, that is. That's going on barracudas. I like it. I like that Bristol's got this amazing tradition of natural history as well. I think that's fantastic. That's really, really incredible. My dad, right, as he got more and more disabled, his world shrank. But because of all these amazing world-leading documentaries like Planet Earth 3, Blue Planet, they're all made in this city, we were able to watch them and bring that world to my dad as his shrank. And that's an amazing legacy, and some of my favourite memories are watching those shows with my dad. I do wish, though, right, when he's narrating them, David Attenborough wouldn't, always mention climate change. That really harshes my vibe. I'll be watching it, learning about an eel, having a great time, and then his voiceover comes over and he goes, oh, actually, that eel's fucked. Thanks for that, David. Why am I learning about that one then? There must be another eel that's going to make it. Also, rising sea levels, there's more space than ever now if you're an eel. If you can't make it under these conditions, you don't have what it takes. I do get why he uses his platform for that. I'm worried about climate change. Do you know guys tend to care less about it? They tend to recycle less. They tend to think about it less. It's really interesting, and I've got a theory on that. I reckon, when guys will go referring to down there, going, "Oh, it's smaller because it's cold," right? Even though it's never the other way around. No one's ever like, "It's bigger because it's hot." People aren't like, "Oh no, don't go in that sauna. Your pants will burst." Just in the desert, it's dragging behind. I reckon a lot of guys think like that, They hear the stats and they go, yeah, 2 degrees in 20 years. Yeah, I'll see a few millimetres out of that. I'm willing to take that trade. Just a sweaty apocalypse where everybody's hung. Windmilling into oblivion. Which is sustainable, so it would work out. I get why Attenborough uses his platform. It's an important thing. He's had an interesting life, hasn't he? He's narrated the deaths of so many animals. If you were like a badger in the wild and you heard his voice, you would shit yourself. David Attenborough's voice is like the beginning of the Hunger Games for a badger. I think it's only fair that on the way out they get a badger to narrate him. See how he likes it. Or I guess he could narrate himself, right? He's got this great voice and he's narrated these things. And if he narrated himself on the way out, people would go, at least he died doing what he loved. Which I don't think it makes sense as an expression, right? I don't think it makes any sense. And I'll give you an example, right? Let's say you love playing tennis. You've led a full, wonderful life. You've played tennis throughout it, but then you realise while you're on the courts that you're going to pass over. I would say the main thing you're doing then, no longer, is playing tennis. Is it, right? The main thing you're doing is dying. Way over here, anything tennis related at all. People recounting that day wouldn't be like, how was it? Oh, Tom and Alan played a great match, very close, but Tom won in the end, also Alan died. You're leading with Alan died, right? That's the main thing that happened. So all I'm saying is, unless you love dying, it's impossible to die doing what you love. Right? The only people that die doing what they love are suicide bombers. But you don't hear that on the news, do you? 10 killed in an attack today. The perpetrator at least died doing what he loved. In other news, the gilfs are doing all right. Far better to die doing something that you hate. We've all had moments in our lives where you're like, oh, I wish I was dead. And if it happened then, ideal, great. You've saved me an afternoon, Grim Reaper. Now I don't have to go to that shitty baby shower. And if it was at a baby shower, you could do like a really fun line as well. You could be like, ooh, one in, one out. Have some fun with it. I appreciate that might be a little bit morbid for some people's tastes, you know. And I'd hope you'd forgive me for thinking like that, given the year that I've had or so, you know, in the last couple of years. And I want you to know, like, I am all right talking about all this stuff. I am fine, you know. And at the time when my father passed, a lot of friends suggested therapy to me. And that's important. You know, I took that seriously. I know therapy helps a lot of people better themselves. And at the time, I was like, right, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to see what the first step might look like. And it looked, you know, worked it out. It was roughly about 50 quid a week or a session, depending on how you want to mix it. And I thought, right, okay, do I want to overcome past trauma? Do I want to be the best me that I can be a better comedian, friend, partner? Or do I want to have £50? And I think I'd rather have £50. That's fish money, that is. But I'm glad that I've looked that up now, because now whenever I'm feeling low in the week or I'm feeling a bit down, but then I remember that I've got £50, that really cheers me up. £50, that is 3 restaurant burgers a week. 3 burgers a week. If you can eat 3 restaurant burgers a week and you don't feel better about yourself, well, you need therapy. I'm a more empathetic person these days, I think, having been through what I've been through. I ran into a friend who I hadn't seen in a very, very long time. And I said, oh, hey, man, where have you been? I've missed you. He goes, well, you know, it's been a bit tough. You know, my uncle had a terminal disease. Uncle? The dog? And he went, no, my human uncle. But I heard terminal, you know, I put those two things together and I thought, you know, I've been through something similar. So I said to him, man, I'm not going to say I understand what it's like, but I've been through something similar. If you need to talk, let me know. I'm here for you. He said, oh, no, don't worry about it. He got better. I was like, well, it's not terminal then, is it? What your uncle had was a disease, but it wasn't terminal. All terminal means is the end. Anything could be terminal, but it must be the end. You can be walking on a cliff edge, and if you can't read a sign that says don't walk here, then you have terminal dyslexia. What my dad had, though, well, that was definitely terminal, was motor neurone. That's what did him. Most famously had by Stephen Hawking, of course. We all saw, by the way, Stephen Hawking at the start of the year, pictured on that island, right, on Epstein's Island. Stephen Hawking was pictured there. That is insane. I had no idea Epstein's Island was disabled accessible. What an inclusive paedophile he was. Honestly, I thought I'd made my mind up about him. But my dad, right, you know, very heavily disabled towards the end, he couldn't come watch me do the thing that I love, right? For example, this venue is less accessible than Epstein's Island. That is insane, right? You know, he couldn't come watch me do the thing that I love, but he could have visited a nonce's fortress. What kind of message are we sending to disabled people in this country? It's like, no, you can't come have a laugh, but we do have an all-inclusive you might like. People say all sorts of things as well about Hawking, the fact that he was pictured there, you know, lots of conspiratorial stuff. I'm not going to say anything on that, really. I'm going to agree that it's a horrendous look that he was pictured there, but that doesn't mean he was getting up to the very worst things that were happening there. You know, more investigation is needed. And it's also a statistic, actually, that able-bodied people are regrettably far, far more likely to offend as paedophiles than disabled people. And I like to think that's not because there's anything inherent about being able-bodied that makes you more likely to be a paedophile. I just think it's that actually structurally inequality means that disabled paedophiles aren't able to access the same opportunities as able-bodied paedophiles. Like in a truly equal society, they would offend at the same rate. The fact that there aren't more out there is to our discredit. I think of some of the barriers my dad might have faced. Had he wanted to be a paedophile, he'd have had to say to my mum, his wife of 30 years, I'm a paedophile. You know, come out isn't the right word, reveal. You know, and then he has to hope that she's on board, and then you can't also get a grant for that. The council aren't like, oh great, we'll put a ramp on all the schools. Put a net on the chair, off you go. To be fair though, they did give him a really big van. Now, I can tell some of you are a little bit uncomfortable right now, but I actually think I'm being very progressive. But the reason I mention Hawking, right, isn't to be glib. It's because he's actually a really good example of how motor neuron the disease works, right? Because he famously had that chair, right? And how that chair worked, it was controlled by one muscle, which was his eye muscle, because the disease is degenerative, so you gradually lose control of your body. And Hawking had stopped at this one muscle, and he was able to move this chair around. Amazing. My dad was going through the same process, and it was difficult to watch, and you'd come down not knowing where he was going to be. But there was one part of him that looked like it was never going to betray him. So it was going to stand firm. And that was his dick. The whole time, my dad's dick worked. And you'd come down not knowing, and you go, oh, how's it going, Dad? And he'd go, yeah, it still works. And that would really cheer him up. And I would joke to him, oh, okay, well, knowing what I know about Hawking, if you hang on long enough, Dad, they will build a chair around that. Just swinging it round, pressing all the buttons. No one can stop him. At least he died doing what he loved. And with my blood. It's difficult watching your dad go through that. I felt like he kept me at arm's length, because I'm lucky to know that he had the disease, but he hid it, and I don't know how long he hid it for. And I think, would I have made different choices had I known earlier? And I think I would have. But the reason he didn't tell anyone initially is because he was worried. He wanted to protect us. It was this idea of masculinity, that he didn't want to be vulnerable. And he withheld that from us. And he saw it as protecting. To me, it felt a little bit like a distance. My mum did all of the care. I was never involved. And that was difficult to work through, right? But as the disease progressed, there was one thing that he did allow me to do, because it wasn't a front to his masculinity. And that was, eventually, I was allowed to shave him. I would shave him once a week, because it was like, oh, that's a man-on-man thing. That's fine. You know, and I'm grateful for that. I do wish, though, that he hadn't wanted Brazilian. I was definitely allergic to those nuts. And that is a tough one to explain to the coroner. Like, no, it's cold in the morgue. You've got to make it look bigger. I tell you what, though, it was huge when they cremated him. But I really am grateful, particularly for the time, when I got to shave my dad, because we would talk about all sorts of things. And, the nature of the disease means that, you know that the end is coming. And I think anyone that knows that's happening, they start to think about their legacy and what is happening in their lives and what will remain when they have moved on. And my dad would ask me, are you going to have kids? And that's a bigger question for me than it seems, because the nature of what did my dad is genetic, right? So there's a chance that I might have it and I might pass it on to children. And I don't want to raise a child and they go, Father, why do I suffer? And it's difficult, right? That's tough. And I don't know whether I have the disease. I've applied for gene therapy. They can test you to see whether you have it. But I haven't been able to get that because hospitals are at capacity and there is more essential work to be done. And I don't begrudge that. People even say to me, why do you even want to know? I'm like, of course I want to know. The only thing worse than dying at 50 is dying with a fuck-off pension. Yeah. I want to be on my deathbed thinking, God, this is rough, but that cruise was sick. But my dad would ask me, he would say, "Are you going to have kids?" And eventually I'd say, "Well, look, Dad, it's not no anymore. It's I'm not ready. I'm not ready to have kids." He said, "But that's the wrong way to think about it. It's not something that you can be ready for. It's an occasion you step up to. It's not something you can prepare for. It's a test of character. It's a challenge that you rise to. And I know you'll be a great dad. You know, you're generous, you give blood a lot, you mentor the little boys that you work with and the other children, I know you care, and you're free in the day a lot, you can split childcare." I know you'll be a great dad. And that's really stuck with me. It really has, you know, these past few years. And I still think about that. And I'm pleased to say, as of a couple of months ago, I am now ready. So if you know anyone that wants to put out, I've just come into this great barge. Told you it was the message of the show. Have a lovely evening. Thank you so much for coming to watch. I'll see you later. Good night. I just feel like Harry's having me on. Like, it doesn't have to be like this. Like, you know, I worked hard on the special. It could have been fine. It could have been good. I mean, hopefully it'll be all right. I've got the costume now this year, at least.
What are you wearing?
Oh, you wear this? You know, me and my puffins? You need something like eye-catching for online.
It's distracting, but...
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to distract them. We swipe your foot and be like, "What, dogs again?" They're like, "Oh, what's that? Puffins?"
Puffins.
Yeah, puffins.
Don't wear the puffin top.
This one's adorable. This one's for comedy. This is a baby puffin. And that's his mummy and his daddy.
Is it tie-dye as well?
Yeah, yes, tie-dye puffin top.
It was £6 in a charity shop. Can you believe that?
I can.
What?
Don't wear the shirt. You're an idiot if you wear the shirt.
I cannot be in this headspace before I'm about to go on. I'm going to nip out and get like an ice cream or something, just chill myself out. Yeah, ice cream, yeah. Yeah, I like ice cream. There's a nice one around the corner. You know, I'm huffing and puffing, and you're giving me nothing. I'm going to go. I'm out. I'm going to get an ice cream. I'll see you later.